If there's one thing we have great disdain for in society today, it is oppression.
Well, everybody's bloody oppressed in the past. Jesus, human history is a complete catastrophic nightmare. The more you read it, the more horrified you become.
And one thing that is in running for having the most connotation of oppression is the idea of submission.
Distinguishing between submission and involuntary slavery isn't simple. And the word submission has connotations of involuntary slavery.
And no one hates the word more than women.
If you find yourself abandoning your wants, needs, desires to make something work, I'm here to tell you it was never a match to begin with.
It is the recipe for a hot button topic on every dating show on YouTube.
I don't know, the idea of submission it just did not feel good.
People have tried to define it.
I break it up into 2 words.
Okay.
Submission.
Okay.
Make it sound less horrible.
But I do feel like the happiest women in the world are the ones that look up to a man.
But at the end of the day, the word still reminds most people of oppression. Even the worst form of oppression, slavery. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, submission is the act of submitting, a verb that means to yield or to be subject to the will or authority of another. And there is no denying it. This definition is unsettling for anyone in a modern society. Even the people advocating for women to submit to their husbands can't escape this reality, so they try to destigmatize it.
Slavery is forced
Yes.
submission. Submission, coming under someone's mission, is a choice.
That something is consensual doesn't make it any less harsh. The average human doesn't want to yield to the will of another. They are not fascinated or liberated by the idea of giving up their will or desires for that of someone else, okay? So should a woman submit to a man in a marital or long-term relationship? Is it fair to demand such a sacrifice from her? A great way to answer these questions is to consider the conversation around this subject, especially from the men who talk about it a lot. And notice something that they all fail to recognize, the source of the idea that they completely ignore.
I think that if a woman cannot look up to you in some way, then she cannot respect you. And if she cannot respect you, she cannot love you.
Few months ago, Jubilee published a middle ground episode between so-called alpha and beta males. And this question was asked.
Submissive women are more attractive than dominating women.
Oh, hell yeah. You know.
Most of the alphas were in favor of the notion, and all the betas were with no surprise against it. The conversation around the question was interesting and insightful. This guy, Justin, presents himself as an alpha in every possible way. He's so alpha that he couldn't sit properly, and he had a few interesting takes. They were unnecessarily hyperbolical.
I think one of the most beautiful things about love is being able to fully take care of a woman in every way, whether that's emotionally.
I'm not sure a woman wants a man to fully take care of her in every way, and I'm sure he doesn't mean it that way.
Everything about that, like every fairy tale that was ever written for all of time was about a man saving a woman from a castle and a dragon, right?
But that's not the same as fully taking care of a woman in every way. A damsel in distress is not the same as a helpless paralytic.
Look at the word submission, sub, under, a mission.
Submission is not sub and mission, okay? It's the noun form of the verb submit, which comes from 2 Latin words sub and mittere. Together, they mean to put or send under.
Truly, deep down, every woman would love nothing more than to be more feminine in a role, in a family, and take on that either that motherly role or that nurturing role, or the role that feels supportive to the overall mission of a man.
Exactly. And here is why he came to this conclusion.
Case in point, look at the workplace. You don't see women applying for jobs to be power line guys or paying steel at steel companies. They're not picketing outside of the United States Army being like, why won't you draft me? They don't want that smoke, bro.
Yes, women don't want jobs or mission because they don't want the smoke from working in an oil rig. Even though Justin here also doesn't want that smoke either. Whatever he does to make his money, a woman can do the same. But somehow, he gets to identify with roughnecks and military men because they all have penises. That's why women should submit to him and follow him.
You can be a woman. You're safe, sweetheart. You come with me. You see a high level of women on antidepressants more than ever, right? And I think that's a bunch of women trying to cope with trying to be like a man.
Justin is not only an alpha male, he's also a psychologist. It's not like having a menstrual cycle or being pregnant has anything to do with the negative emotions they often feel. It has to be their jobs and the fact that they have missions. I mean, ask yourself this question.
Are you more attracted to a woman that has a high-paying job or to a woman's beauty?
Points made, ladies and gentlemen. It's not like in places like Nigeria with harsh economic conditions, a woman having a job can make a reasonable man find her attractive. What matters is her beauty, okay? Because masculine men want beautiful, submissive, jobless, directionless women.
The more masculine you are, the more you want the woman to be submissive.
You had the man, but he's not done.
I don't need any back talk. I don't need any lip. I don't need any attitude. It's my way or the highway.
Some of the strongest women in the world right now are sitting in submissive roles because they're strong enough to think for themselves and do what they feel good in their heart. Because there are women that do want to be submissive naturally.
That's correct. Women with jobs and missions, they don't know what they want, okay? But women without jobs and missions, they know exactly what they want, right? I mean, who can argue against such advanced next level logic?
Things you said is like when you and your partner.
As I listen to these men talk about submission, I notice something. They are co-opting an idea that they don't understand. This is an idea from the greatest literature in Western civilization, the Bible, famously the 5th chapter of Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus. So to understand the idea of submission in marriage, you have to look at the book where the idea originated from. The Bible essentially defines submission as obedience and slavery. It explains that a man is a slave to anything he obeys. So, a wife should be a slave to her husband. Sarah calling Abraham Lord is an example of this. In fact, Paul told wives to reverence their husbands. But Peter also said something similar to husbands. He told them to respect their wives, which Paul also re-echoed in a different way. Paul told husbands to love their wives, but not just by protecting and providing for her. No, like Christ loved the church and died for her. So to understand Paul's doctrine of the husband's authority, we must look at the example Jesus set for his disciples. When the time of his crucifixion drew near, Jesus took a bowl of water, dressed up like a servant, and washed his disciples' feet like a slave would do for his master in those days. Afterwards, he told them that the greatest in his Father's kingdom is the servant of all. And he didn't come to be a master, but to be a servant. Speaking about him, the apostles later said that he was obedient even to the point of death, a slave even to the point of dying for the ones he loved. And that's how men are supposed to love their wives according to the doctrine of submission. Nothing about that makes the man a master and the woman a servant. Nothing about that speaks of dignity and respect, but of suffering and sacrifice. It was said that Jesus disregarded the shame of dying on the cross. He told his disciples to love each other the same way he loved them and gave his life for them. That's what Paul and Peter were talking about. A love that submits and denies itself for the benefit of another. A love that turns you into a slave. But what we hear today from the dating experts is what Jesus saw as an ungodly interpretation of authority, where those in power lord it over their subjects. Jesus is not that kind of king, and his disciples are not those kind of men. They exercise authority in servitude. They have been taught to compete and outdo each other in doing good and being servants. The idea is for everyone to submit to each other, which is how the famous instruction began. This has nothing to do with a woman having a job or being a stay-at-home mom. This is more than bringing the bacon home and fixing the kitchen sink.
Each of you should jointly submit to the spirit that makes your relationship redemptive and dynamic. So there's an element of submission in some sense that's involved, but it's not unidirectional, and it's never been conceptualized that way, not by people who thought deeply about such things. And
the problem of the conversation around submission today is that it is one-sided in favor of the man. These modern men see submission as a woman's way of pleasing the egotistic desires of their husband. But that is a far cry from the intention of the writers of the Bible.
there's a submission in that. That's the submission of maturity. That's the adoption of voluntary responsibility. That's putting away childish things. It's not doing today what you know will damage you or your partner tomorrow. It's foregoing impulsive hedonistic pleasure. All of that in the service of something that's genuinely higher.
If you can't do any of that, then submission shouldn't be in your vocabulary. Don't ask for what you can't give exceedingly.